Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. The Journey Home. Sergeant Leah Carter's boots echoed on the marble floors of the bustling international airport. Every step reminded her of the weight she carried, not just the duffel bag slung over her shoulder, but the invisible burden of memories etched into her soul. After 14 months of deployment overseas, she was finally heading home. The thought of seeing her family made her heart race, but exhaustion tugged at her every muscle. Her uniform, a faded olive green, bore testament to countless days in the harsh desert sun, nights spent under a canopy of stars, and the scars of a conflict that had claimed many she called friends. Leah was used to blending in, despite her uniform often drawing stares. Today, however, she was grateful when a smiling airline attendant stopped her at the gate. "Sergeant Carter?" the attendant asked, her eyes warm with respect. "Yes, ma'am," Leah replied, adjusting her bag. "We've upgraded your seat to first class," the attendant said with a grin. "A small thank you for your service." Leah blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, that's not necessary." "Please, it's our honor," the attendant insisted. With a reluctant smile, Leah accepted. She boarded the plane, aware of the curious eyes following her as she made her way to the luxurious first-class cabin. She found her seat, 3A, and carefully placed her duffel bag in the overhead compartment. Sinking into the plush leather seat, she felt a pang of unease amidst passengers dressed in tailored suits and designer outfits. Leah wore no jewelry, save for her military-issued watch and a simple dog tag engraved with her name. As she began to relax, a shadow loomed beside her. "Excuse me," a man's voice cut through the cabin's soft hum. Leah turned to see a tall, sharply dressed man in his late 40s. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, his eyes cold and assessing. "Yes?" she asked, sitting up straighter. "I think you're in my seat," he said, holding up his ticket. Leah glanced at his boarding pass, then at hers. "This is 3A, she said politely, holding up her own ticket. "It seems we're both assigned here." He squinted at her ticket, then back at her, his expression darkening. "There must be some mistake. This seat isn't meant for someone like you," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. Leah felt her chest tighten. "Someone like me," she repeated, her tone measured. "You're military," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "Shouldn't you be in coach with the other soldiers?" The words stung more than she cared to admit. Years of serving her country, of enduring the pain and loss of war, couldn't shield her from the sting of prejudice. She took a deep breath. "This seat was assigned to me, sir. I'm not moving." His lips pressed into a thin line as he looked around, seeking support. A few passengers glanced away uncomfortably, while others watched with thinly veiled interest. "This is absurd," he muttered, clearly hoping someone would back him up. The flight attendant arrived, her professional demeanor unshaken by the tension in the air. "Is there a problem?" she asked. "This woman is in my seat," the man declared. "I don't know how, but this must be a mistake." The attendant looked at Leah's ticket, then the man's. "Sir, your seat is 5A, just a few rows back," she said calmly. Turning to Leah, she added, "Sergeant Carter, thank you for your service. You're in the correct seat." The man's face reddened, but he said nothing. With a huff, he turned and stalked to his assigned seat. Leah exhaled, her hands gripping the armrests. The attendant leaned down and whispered, "If you need anything, just let me know." Leah nodded gratefully, though the encounter left her shaken. The other passengers returned to their conversations, but she felt their eyes lingering. As the plane taxied and took off, Leah stared out the window, her thoughts drifting back to her deployment. She remembered the scorching heat, the sound of helicopters slicing through the air, and the faces of her comrades. Some of those faces haunted her, the ones who didn't make it back. She had survived, but survival carried its own burden. The man's words replayed in her mind. "Shouldn't you be in coach?" They echoed the subtle and overt prejudice she'd faced throughout her life, amplified by her identity as a black woman in the military. She had fought harder, worked longer, and sacrificed more than many of her peers, yet there were still those who saw her as less deserving. Her reflection was interrupted by the man in 5A. He was glaring at her, his annoyance still palpable. Leah's grip on the armrest tightened, but she refused to meet his gaze. A decision to act. Hours passed, and the cabin lights dimmed as the flight settled into a calm rhythm. Leah couldn't sleep. The man's hostility lingered in the air, a shadow over what should have been a joyous journey home. Leah reached into her bag and pulled out a small notepad and pen. If she had learned anything from her years in the military, it was that silence often let prejudice fester. She wasn't one to confront hostility with anger, but she believed in the power of words. She began to write. Dear Sir. I wanted to address our earlier encounter. I understand that my presence in first class may have been unexpected, but I hope this note can provide some perspective. My seat was not a mistake, it was given to me as a small token of gratitude for my service. I have spent years defending the freedoms we all enjoy, alongside brave men and women from every background. I've seen the cost of those freedoms, and I carry the memories of those who gave everything so others could live without fear or discrimination. We all have our struggles, our prejudices, and our pain. But I believe we can choose kindness. We can choose to see each other not for our differences, but for the humanity that connects us. I hope this note can serve as a reminder that respect and compassion are gifts we can all afford to give. Sincerely, Sergeant Leah Carter *. Leah folded the note and flagged down the flight attendant. Could you give this to the gentleman in 5A? She asked quietly. The attendant's eyes softened. Of course. Leah watched as the attendant delivered the note. The man unfolded it, his brow furrowing as he read. His expression shifted from irritation to confusion, then to something softer, something that looked almost like regret. Leah didn't expect an apology or even an acknowledgement. She had done her part to bridge the divide, and that was enough for her. She closed her eyes, hoping for a moment of peace before the flight landed. A bridge forged in humanity. The remainder of the flight passed in relative silence. Sergeant Leah Carter watched the world below as the plane soared through a sea of clouds, her heart heavy yet resolute. The note had been her way of turning an ugly moment into a chance for understanding, but she couldn't help but wonder how it had been received. As the plane began its descent, Leah braced herself. She felt the usual mix of anticipation and anxiety that accompanied a return home after deployment. Yet, this time, it was mingled with the lingering discomfort of the earlier encounter. The man in 5A, David, as Leah had overheard the flight attendant call him, remained quiet. From her peripheral view, she noticed him clutching the note tightly, his head bowed in thought. His demeanor was no longer one of arrogance or annoyance. Instead, he seemed subdued, almost reflective. The plane touched down, and a soft ripple of applause echoed through the cabin, as was tradition for safe landings. Leah rose to retrieve her duffel bag, her thoughts already shifting to the reunion with her family waiting just beyond the gate. As she turned to leave, David was suddenly standing in front of her, blocking her path. His face, which had been hard and closed off before, now looked open, vulnerable. He held the note in one hand, the other nervously clutching the strap of his leather briefcase. Sergeant Carter, he began, his voice unsteady. Leah straightened, her military training instinctively kicking in. Yes? David cleared his throat, glancing at the note as though it were a lifeline. I read your note, he said finally, his words halting but sincere. And I realized that I owe you an apology. A profound one. The tension Leah had been carrying since their first interaction began to ease, though her face remained neutral. I appreciate that, she said simply. David shifted, looking deeply uncomfortable yet determined to continue. I made a terrible assumption about you, about your worth, your place. That wasn't fair, and it certainly wasn't right. I let my own biases, and my own pain, get in the way of seeing you for who you are. And I'm sorry. Leah studied him, her sharp eyes softened by the glint of sincerity in his. Thank you, she replied after a moment. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. David nodded, swallowing hard. You said in your note that you carry memories of those who didn't make it home, he said quietly. I can't imagine what that's like, but I think I understand a little. He hesitated, then added, my younger brother, Michael, was in the army. He didn't come back from Afghanistan. I guess seeing you today, in uniform, brought back a lot of emotions I thought I'd buried. Leah felt a pang of empathy as she regarded him. I'm sorry for your loss, she said, her tone gentle. It's never easy to lose someone, especially in service to this country. But I hope you know that his sacrifice mattered. David's eyes glistened as he nodded. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for your service, too. People like me, we take so much for granted. We forget that people like you give so much so that we can live our lives in peace. The two stood there for a moment, the hum of passengers disembarking around them fading into the background. It was a strange kind of silence, not awkward, but meaningful. A chance for redemption. As they exited the plane, Leah expected the conversation to end there. But David surprised her. Sergeant Carter, he called after her. Wait a moment. Leah turned, her duffel bag resting heavily on her shoulder. David held out a business card. I don't know if this means anything coming from me, but if you ever need anything, a favor, a connection, a recommendation, you can count on me. It's the least I can do. Leah took the card, the embossed text revealing his position as a high-ranking executive at a tech company. She tucked it into her pocket, unsure if she'd ever use it but appreciating the gesture. Thank you, David. That means a lot. Before she could walk away, he added, and I'll make sure to honor my brother's memory by being a better person. Today reminded me that I have a lot to learn and unlearn. Leah smiled. We all do, she said. The reunion. Walking into the arrivals hall, Leah's heart swelled as she spotted her family waiting for her. Her mother, with tears streaming down her face, rushed forward to embrace her, followed by her younger siblings and her father, who clapped her shoulder with pride. For a while, the earlier events of the flight faded into the background. Leah basked in the warmth of her family's love, the noise of the airport becoming a blur. But as she settled into the car for the drive home, her thoughts drifted back to David. She hoped the encounter had sparked something lasting in him, a seed of change that might grow into a broader understanding of others. A ripple effect. Weeks later, Leah received an email from David. It was unexpected, but welcome. The email read, Dear Sergeant Carter. I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to let you know that our conversation on the plane had a profound impact on me. Since then, I've been volunteering with a veteran support organization in my brother's honor. I've also started to challenge my own biases and encourage those around me to do the same. I thought you should know that your note didn't just change how I see you, it changed how I see the world. Thank you for your service, your courage, and your compassion. You reminded me that humanity is about connection, not division. With gratitude. David Hensley *. Leah read the email twice, a soft smile spreading across her face. The world was far from perfect, but moments like these reminded her that change was possible. One conversation, one note, one act of courage, it all mattered. Folding the email, she placed it alongside her military memorabilia, a token of the small but powerful victory she had won that day.